This is the story of the longest day in human history. The first morning after day 0, when 7 billion people woke up to discover they'd lost yesterday. My name is Ethan Reed, at least. That's what my phone says. I'm a 32-year-old sociology professor in Boston. But when I opened my eyes that morning, I didn't know any of that. I didn't recognize the face staring back at me from the mirror. I didn't remember this apartment, these books, this life. There was just nothing, a blank slate where yesterday should have been. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone. The lock screen showed my face, my name, but they felt like they belonged to a stranger. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. What's my past goal? For digits that should be automatic, muscle memory gone. Then I remembered fingerprint. My thumb pressed against the sensor, and the phone unlocked. The screen flooded with information. Contacts: Mom, Sarah, girlfriend, maybe? Dr. Martinez, colleague. Photos of someone who looked like me hiking in the White Mountains, teaching in a lecture hall, laughing at a bar with friends I didn't recognize. And then I saw it. I hit play. A voice memo recorded last night at 11:47 p.m.
If you're listening to this, it means it happened. You've forgotten. We all have.
Your name is Ethan Reed. You're a sociology professor at Boston University. You study collective memory and social identity. Listen carefully. If everyone wakes up with amnesia tomorrow, it's not random. It's not natural. Someone did this. Trust Annette and she'll find you. And whatever you do, don't trust the memory committee. Memory committee? What the hell was I talking about? I walked to the window. From my 6th floor apartment, I could see the city. Smoke rose from at least 3 locations. Cars had crashed into each other at the intersection below. A small crowd gathered on the street corner. People looking at each other with the same confused, terrified expression I'd seen in my mirror. A woman stood in the middle of the street, screaming, "Does anyone know who I am? Please, someone must know me." Nobody answered, because nobody knew. Not her, not themselves. This wasn't just happening to me. This was happening to everyone. I grabbed my jacket and ran for the door. I had to see it for myself. I had to understand what my recorded voice meant. If the whole world forgot yesterday, what happens to civilization? The streets of Boston looked like a war zone. But there were no soldiers, no bombs. Just confusion weaponized into chaos. At the intersection of Commonwealth and Dartmouth, 4 cars sat mangled together, steam rising from their crushed hoods. The drivers stood nearby, shouting at each other, pointing fingers. But their accusations made no sense. None of them remembered getting into their cars. None of them remembered where they were going. They'd been driving on autopilot, muscle memory keeping them on the road. Until muscle memory failed and physics took over. I walked past them toward downtown crossing. The city was waking up to catastrophe. A Bank of America branch had its windows smashed. People crowded inside, desperate, confused. The tellers looked just as lost as the customers. Nobody remembered passwords. Nobody remembered account numbers. If you don't remember depositing money, earning money, saving money, does it even belong to you anymore? The entire financial system was evaporating before my eyes. I kept walking. Massachusetts General Hospital came into view. Ambulances lined the emergency entrance, their sirens wailing. Medical staff in scrubs stood outside, some crying. Some staring at their hands like they'd never seen them before. A doctor clutched his badge, reading his own name over and over. His badge said he was a surgeon, but he couldn't remember how to save the bleeding patient on the gurney in front of him. The nurses were doing better. Their hands remembered what their minds had forgotten. Fingers that knew how to insert IVs, how to check vitals, how to clean wounds. Muscle memory was saving lives, but it wouldn't be enough. Complex procedures, diagnoses, medications, all that knowledge was gone. I passed a park where an elderly couple sat on a bench. A foot of space separated them, an invisible wall. The man held his phone, scrolling through photos. The woman held her wallet, staring at her driver's license. They had the same last name, Patterson. The phone showed decades of photos together, birthdays, vacations, grandchildren. A golden anniversary just 2 months ago. But the woman's eyes were empty. She didn't remember 50 years of marriage. She didn't remember this stranger sitting next to her. The man reached out slowly, offering his hand. The woman looked at it for a long moment, then she took it. Starting over. Day 1. After 50 years, they would have to fall in love again from scratch. I had to turn away. My eyes were burning. This was the world now. 7 billion people, waking up as strangers to themselves, and everyone they'd ever loved. By noon, panic was giving way to something else. Adaptation. Survival instinct. I walked down Newbury Street and saw lines forming outside tattoo parlors. Not the usual hipsters and college kids, but everyone. Business executives, elderly women, teenagers. All waiting for the same thing, to carve their identities into their skin. Inside one shop, 3 tattoo artists worked simultaneously, their machines buzzing like angry wasps. A middle-aged man sat shirtless, wincing as black ink spelled out words across his ribs. Your name is Marcus Johnson. You have a 7-year-old daughter named Emily. She goes to Newton Elementary. You must pick her up at 3 p.m. every day. Do not forget her. A young woman was getting text tattooed along her forearm. Do not trust strangers, even if they claim to be your husband. Even if they have photos, even if they seem familiar. An elderly man had his chest covered in vital information. Heart medication, blue bottle, second drawer, 1 pill every morning. Allergic to penicillin. Son's phone number, address of home. The waiting customers stood with notebooks and phones, frantically scribbling notes on their arms with permanent markers. One woman was using lipstick to write on a mirror. Another man had covered his apartment walls with sticky notes. Layers upon layers of yellow squares containing the basic facts of his existence. Outside a stationery store, the shelves were completely empty. Every notebook, every pack of sticky notes, every marker and pen sold out in hours. The owner sat on the floor, dazed, staring at the bare shelves. She couldn't remember her supplier's name. Couldn't remember how to restock. I stopped at a community center where someone had set up a makeshift message board. The wall was covered with handwritten notes. Seeking information. I'm David Ch.1. If you know me, please contact this number. And, warning, there are people claiming to be your relatives to steal from you. Be careful. And, if you're reading this tomorrow, go to your phone. Open the photos, that's who you were. Humanity was trying to build a bridge between today and tomorrow. Trying to leave breadcrumbs for their future selves. But, would it be enough? Would you trust a note written by a stranger, even if that stranger was you? I pulled out my phone and started recording voice memos. Observations, details, everything I could capture about this first day. If I was going to forget, at least I'd leave myself evidence. Around 2 p.m., my phone buzzed with an emergency alert. Prison fire in Concord. Mass evacuation. Unknown number of escapees. I pulled up the news on my phone. Aerial footage showed smoke pouring from the Massachusetts Correctional Institution. Hundreds of people were streaming out of the building, some in orange jumpsuits, some in guard uniforms. But nobody was chasing anyone. Nobody was maintaining the perimeter. Because nobody remembered who was supposed to be locked up. The news anchor tried to maintain composure, but I could hear the tremor in her voice. She was reading from a script, probably written by someone else, because she kept stumbling over basic facts. The guards had woken up, not remembering their jobs, their training, or which inmates were dangerous. The inmates had woken up, not remembering their crimes. I watched the footage. A man in an orange jumpsuit stared at the number printed on his chest. C-7743, just a number. No context. Was he a thief? A murderer? Did he deserve to be in that jumpsuit, or was this all a mistake? Another man, wearing a guard's uniform, stood frozen near the gate. His badge said he was Officer Rodriguez. But he couldn't remember taking an oath. Couldn't remember any of the people walking past him. Should he stop them? Were they dangerous? Or were they victims of a system that no longer made sense? Some inmates tore off their jumpsuits and threw them into a burning pile. Others walked into the nearby town, blending into the crowds. In a world where everyone had forgotten everything, there were no criminals. No past offenses. No guilt. The concept of justice had evaporated overnight. I thought about my recorded message from last night. Someone did this. If that was true, if this amnesia was deliberate, then someone had just erased every crime ever committed. Wiped the slate clean for rapists, murderers, terrorists. Given them all a fresh start. Or maybe that was the point. Maybe whoever did this believed humanity needed a reset. A chance to start over without the weight of history, without the baggage of past sins. But history isn't just about sin. It's about learning. About remembering mistakes so we don't repeat them. Without memory, we were doomed to make the same errors, over and over, in an eternal loop. I kept walking, but I couldn't shake the image of that burning pile of prison uniforms. Flames consuming the last physical evidence of someone's past crimes. Tomorrow, those men would wake up believing they were innocent. And maybe, in a world without memory, they were. I found myself back at Massachusetts General Hospital as the sun started to sink. This time, I went inside. The maternity ward was in chaos. Not the panicked screaming kind, worse, the quiet, devastating kind. I walked past the nursery and saw rows of bassinets, each containing a newborn. 47 babies, according to the nurses' station whiteboard. And next to that number, another one, 47 mothers who didn't recognize them. A young woman, maybe 25, sat in a hospital bed, staring at an infant in a bassinet beside her. A nurse stood nearby, holding a clipboard. The nurse looked exhausted. Her eyes were red from crying, but she was trying to stay professional. The mother shook her head slowly. The nurse showed her the medical bracelet. Mother and baby, matching ID numbers. Labor and delivery records from less than 24 hours ago. Photos taken in the delivery room, showing the woman holding this exact baby, tears of joy on her face. But the woman didn't remember. To her, this tiny creature was a stranger. A stranger that everyone insisted came from her body. I watched as she finally, reluctantly, picked up the baby. The infant started crying. The woman held it awkwardly, like someone who'd never held a baby before. Maybe her body remembered. Maybe some deep maternal instinct would kick in. But her mind was blank. The hospital had converted the chapel into a temporary nursery. Volunteers, mostly older people whose muscle memory included child rearing, were trying to care for dozens of abandoned newborns. But how long could they keep it up? Would these volunteers remember tomorrow that they'd committed to helping? Would they remember which baby needed what? I saw one volunteer, an elderly woman, sitting in a rocking chair with an infant. She was crying silently as she rocked. A photo was taped to the armrest. A young woman, her daughter maybe, but she didn't remember. She was caring for this baby because a note pinned to her shirt told her to. A note she'd written to herself. This was the extinction level problem. If mothers didn't remember their children, if parents couldn't bond with newborns, humanity's future was being severed at its most fundamental connection. I left the maternity ward and found myself in the hallway, leaning against the wall, trying to process what I'd seen. A civilization could survive economic collapse. It could survive political chaos. But could it survive the complete breakdown of the family unit? My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Just an address. The Boston Public Library. 3rd floor. Come now. No name, no explanation. But somehow, I knew who it was from. The voice memo I'd recorded last night had mentioned someone. Trust Anna Chun, she'll find you. It was time to get answers.